We're always looking for a magical combination of courage and genius, for without either, you will surely fail. Mark Andreessen, founder of Andreessen Horowitz and Netscape. What I love about coaching startup CEOs on their pitch deck is it gives me an opportunity to help them share their vision, their ideas, their magic with a crowd, an audience who don't really see the future that they see for themselves, which is exactly why in this week's episode of Master Talk, I'm going to teach you the basics on how to create the perfect pitch deck. Hey everyone, Brendan from Master Talk here on your go-to channel to mastering your talk. And today we're talking about the art of how to craft and deliver the ultimate pitch deck for investors. So let's get into it. Number one, understand how to explain our business in one sentence. Let's start with the obvious miss for founders, which is whenever we convey an idea, we need to understand that pitching is not just about getting on a stage and sharing our startup with the world. It's the dinner conversations, it's networking events, it's going to places where you're meeting really important people, it's one-on-one conversations, it's getting an employee to work with you instead of somebody else. Whether they're existing employees that might leave for another opportunity or candidates that you want to hire into the business. Pitching is an everyday activity and it's 24/7 for as long as your business exists. And that's really the point. That's why you need to know your one sentence. Because if somebody asks you what you do and you're not really sure, or you answer in a way that's too complicated, you're limiting your opportunities. Let me give you an example with Airbnb. There's two ways of explaining that business. The first way of explaining that business is by saying, yeah, it's a marketplace where buyers and sellers transact real estate assets so that they can maximize profit on both sides of the marketplace and customer experience, which is a great way of explaining Airbnb. Or you could just say, yeah, we rent out the extra room in your house for money. Notice how that's so simple that everyone gets it. So let's say you're pitching, you're giving a presentation, and there's a venture capitalist, there's an investor, there's a customer who doesn't necessarily understand what you do, but they might know somebody who needs what you do. They don't understand it. They won't make that introduction for you. That's why the key is to figure out, how do I explain my business so simply that every human being on earth understands it? And here's how you do it. Have deep conversations with every stakeholder of the business, investors, customers, founders, employees, and ask them the simple question. If you were to explain my business back to me in one sentence, how would you explain it? And then they all write their sentence. You have a list of 20 to 25, and then you just pick the best one. There you go. Having the right structure in a startup pitch is important. Problem, solution, competition. What's the market like? What progress have you made? That's traction, timeline, and the vision that you have for the company moving forward. And of course, the ask. How much money do you need to raise in your next round if that's the goal of your pitch? Or it could be getting customers. But there's a bigger piece that a lot of us are missing, which is the founder point of view. Because the pitch, my friends, does not begin when you enter the room. It really begins when your pitch is over. And the smartest people on earth start asking you questions that might not necessarily be related to the business directly. Example. So an investor might come up to you and say, you know, Brendan, what do you think is the future of the communication industry? What do you feel your competitors are getting wrong about your field that you understand or that you feel you're right on? So what the investor's trying to do here is they're trying to see how sharp you really are. That's why the smartest investors or customers or stakeholders, they'll spend most of their time just listening to your points of view and how you handle yourself in those questions. And this is where most founders fail. Because what the investor is looking for is, they're saying, who's the winner? 100 different companies have the same idea, but what's going to make you stand out? Let's go back to Airbnb. There are three key reasons why Airbnb won in the marketplace, even if there was other services like theirs in the past. Like, the couch surfing services is one of them. You could post on Craigslist, there was HomeAway, VRBO. But the reason that Airbnb stood out was because one of timing, because they started the business during the recession. So when times are tough, people are more open to renting out extra rooms in their house because they need extra money to pay for their mortgage. So that's what increased the supply side of getting people to actually want to rent. And then on the people who want to take a vacation, well, they didn't want to go to an expensive hotel during a recession. So they're looking for more budget options. And that's how Airbnb grew really quickly as a platform. The second reason is they understood through their design led culture that trust was actually the most important thing to bridge online. Because at the end of the day, if buyers and sellers trust each other in the transaction, and we can automate that trust without human beings or with minimal amount of effort, well, then we can scale a platform much bigger than any other companies. And then the third one is customer obsession. The Airbnb team is unique. They were extremely hungry and they wanted to win at any cost. So much so that the CEO of Airbnb, Brian Chesky, literally stayed at hundreds of Airbnbs just to talk to the hosts and get the best feedback to make the product better. Notice what I'm doing here, team. I'm not necessarily following a template. I'm telling you how to convey outside of the template why it's obvious that this team was going to win. It was either they win or nobody else wins. So now the question becomes, how do you develop founder point of view? How do you get better at this? Here's a few ways that I recommend. One, study your competition deeply. Ask yourself, what are they getting wrong about their industry that you know is right? Or what do you think is right that they believe is wrong? That's a great way to explain founder point of view and differentiate yourself from other people. The second way to explain founder point of view is to really take the time to get fielded a ton of questions. Ask me a bunch of questions about my ideas so that I'm ready for anything. And the third piece is to munch and absorb a ton of industry information so that you're always the smartest person in the room about your own industry. If the investor feels they're smarter than you and what you're supposed to be an expert in, they'll never invest in your company. And that's true with all stakeholders, employers, customers, and the list goes on. So stay hungry and get hungry to make sure that your founder point of view is better than everyone else's. And finally, number 3, don't focus on the perfect order, focus on the perfect pitch. Newsflash, the first draft will not be the perfect pitch. You need to focus on just quantity over quality, meaning you need to try and get the problem, the solution, the traction, the competition, the vision, but at the end of the day, you need to get a draft. That's the most important piece. The other piece is to get that draft poked a ton of times by the worst critics that you know in your network. So this is how I do it. I call it the question drill. You give a presentation and you have a bunch of people around you asking you questions about your deck until everything is perfect. Have you considered this point? What about the future of this industry? I don't really feel you understand this. I see another company doing this. What do you think about that? So when we're poking holes in a deck, what happens is you start to refine your shield. You get a lot more powerful. You get a lot more resilient. This is what we call in our industry bulletproofing a deck. And then at the end of these roast sessions, as we call them, you want to ask a few questions back to your audience, such as, what slides do you feel was missing in this deck that we can add in the appendix? What do you feel is important for us to add today? What do you think wasn't that necessary? And these questions help us refine our presentation. So instead of trying to find the 10 best slides in any pitch, what I want you to do instead is be a mad scientist. Make a bunch of them. Make a ton of different slides based on the different objections that your audience is giving you. Create a bunch of slides and then craft the story after by ordering the best slides in the right order. That's why I always like to tell founders, you'll never get this right in the first time. And the reason is because you're trying to create something that doesn't exist yet or isn't being done well. So since most people aren't using your product or services, No one really understands the future or what you're trying to do as much as you do. That's reality. So these feedback loops, these conversations are necessary for you to make your presentation better and better and better. And trust me, this will be an evolution throughout the rest of the life cycle of the business. If there's anything that you take away from this video, it's this. Ask questions. Get to know your audience. Don't be afraid to go up to them and say, hey, is there a slide you didn't understand from what I showed today? Because through empathy and through those questions, we're able to deliver a presentation that is so riveting, so engaging, that people want to follow you into the future. And that's what the great visionaries of our era have. They have an ability, but more so an empathy, to take a step back and say, do people actually understand my vision for the future? Because if they don't, it'll make it much harder for me to succeed. So I encourage you to remember that simplicity is the key. Always simplify. Even the hardest businesses in the world can be simplified down to one sentence. Just find yours and you'll unlock potential that you've never seen before with your ideas. As always, if you enjoyed this presentation, be sure to smash that like button and subscribe to the YouTube channel as well to see more videos like this. Speaking of presentations, I also run a bi-monthly workshop online that's free over Zoom. So if you want to jump in on that, there's a link down in the description in the comments section for you to register for the next one. I can't wait to see you there. And of course, if you know a founder or CEO who's struggling with getting their pitch deck together, or they got something, but it's not that solid, I would encourage you to send them this video so that they'll be one step closer to mastering their talk and sharing their ideas with the world.